It's splitter time. Okay, we love our mk1 MR2s, but at some point, even the most devoted of us have to admit, our car has the profile and overbite of every Simpsons character. This is part one of what will be 2 videos. This part 1 covers the aesthetic design, the main construction, weight reduction, and some airflow theory. Part 2 will introduce brand new tech that will accomplish additional weight reduction and decrease the car's drag coefficient. It will include lots more theory and be a true blue nerd fest. I can't wait. As you can see, I'm using the car's bumper outline to dictate the exact shape of the splitter. This is going to keep it OEM looking and borrow from that proven aesthetic. That brings me to outline what the priorities for Gandalf are. First off, keeping the aesthetic design of the splitter in accordance with the successful OEM designs of the car, we want to add strength to the chin of the car. It should look like it belongs there, should always have been there. Yes, this is very hard to do, but possible. We want to keep the splitter as lightweight as possible. There are several tricks to achieve this. Increase the downforce at the nose of the car, but not at the expense of top speed or airflow under the car. The splitter and attachment points have to be extremely strong. Increase airflow through the rad and heat exchanger and up out of the hood vents. And we want to decrease the car's drag coefficient, make the car more slippery. This is cake and eat it too stuff. And I will be introducing new tech, like I told you, that I've never seen on a splitter before. In Gandalf's case here, we've got lots of airflow coming through the air-to-water intercooler, and we've got the rad that's moved back. We've got it slanted the opposite direction, so the airflow is coming up and out, also being sucked out by this low-pressure area right here. So this cardboard serves not only as a template for the splitter shape, I'm going to mock it up to help us evaluate its aesthetic merits, so that we can see if we are on the right track well before we commit to construction. Splitters only really begin to function at above 120 kilometers an hour or 70 miles per hour. Depending on the kind of driving that you do or racing, if you track the car, a splitter may not be a necessary thing. If you are autocrossing and you are at lower nimble speeds, you may not want 15 pounds dangling out in front of your car because it will increase understeer at low speeds. Where a splitter really adds function is in high-speed cornering. And in the case of MR2s, it can increase downforce at high speeds to counter this tendency for the nose to become lighter. In a higher horsepower car, this can become a liability. It is about striking a balance for your car's purpose. There, all done. Thanks for watching. I'm kidding. I would never do that to you guys. Okay. So we still have to squint here or there to help out our imaginations, but I think we've got the design aesthetic nailed down. Here, I'll give you guys a few more angles. Yes, I know I'm asking you to ignore the wave and the cardboard and things like that, but I think this is gonna be it. I think this is it. Here, yeah, check out this angle. See what I'm talking about? I think we've got it. Okay, so it's time to pick a material and get tracing. There are lots of choices for materials. I'm going to go with some illuminates that I can get here locally easily. 3mm illuminate, but I'm going to layer it. So that'll give us some extra strength, extra stability, and right kind of epoxy to get those layers to bond super well. So we're going to design the splitter with some weight considerations in mind to begin with. But then once we know exactly where all of our attachment points are, then I'm going to look at some more weight reduction after the fact so that we don't compromise or kind of limit ourselves to where our attachment points are. The splitter is going to be very strong and the attachment points are going to be very robust and numerous. It's going to be overkill on both of those aspects so that we never have to worry about what happens to this splitter and at the front of the car at high speed. What I'm going to do is retain this air dam, which at higher speeds begins to distort. It's just not stiff enough. You're basically going to be pushing more air right along this bottom edge. So the splitter is going to help guide that air up. More of the air is going to go through and up and out the top of the hood. So part of the plan is to stabilize the air dam onto the splitter right at the point where it makes contact so that it also doesn't flex and distort anymore. A cool bonus about the Illuminate that I've got, the panel, when you peel it off, it's actually white. It seems pretty durable, and it's the right color for me. I mean, my car, if anybody knows my car, it's about 20 different varying stages of brake dust white. So this is going to work just great. My plan is to have 3 stacked layers of 3mm Illuminate, 9mm total. The middle layer, or sandwich layer, is going to have some significant weight reduction using inserts of 3mm foam sign board. To test this, I'm going to make up a 3-layer test piece with these materials and test out the epoxy effectiveness. You can see the white foam board layer in the middle there. We'll let that dry and check back tomorrow. So our sandwich here has dried, and it is impressively rigid. Okay, what I'm checking there first and foremost is, do I hear any kind of sound? And there is nothing. So there's no cracking or separation of the epoxy, and that's really the important thing. If you don't hear that, then everything else is good. This stuff, and I'm not promoting this product, this is what it happens to be. There are probably others similar. This is West System G-Flex. Now, this is not cheap stuff, and you might find some inexpensive substitutes. But what's good about this is that it is flexible. It's for marine applications, so if you've ever been on a fiberglass boat, when that thing is in the middle of the ocean, the whole thing is doing that. That's like breakdancing. So you gotta have flex in the epoxies, and that's what that does. It's gonna work well for this. What I wanna figure out now is how to clean off any glue that's happens to be on the surface, some epoxy left over or got fingerprints on there. So I'm going to try some acetone. I like to use a bit of denim from some old jeans because it doesn't leave a bunch of fuzzy stuff on all the edges. Who closed this damn thing? Okay. So I'm going to wear my nitrile glove here. Nitrile. Sorry. Nitrile. 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 Stupido. Nitrile. Stupido. I guess we'll find out how acetone affects that. Now you don't want to pour the acetone on this because we know it's likely going to, it'll separate all of our epoxy. What we just want to do is wipe the surface of it. Look at that. The other cool thing apparently is that it doesn't seem to affect the coating on this surface. That is a special bonus. Excellent. So this stuff cuts really well using wood blades, whether it's a table saw or a miter saw or jigsaw or skill saw. Whatever you are most comfortable with, really good at, best at. I'm using a table saw, brace it really well, and I've been freehanding my whole life, so I'm comfortable with it, but it's not for everyone. Here goes. So I now have an idea of what kind of weight this is going to add to my car. That's definitely always a concern. I'm somewhat encouraged. If I triple this layer, it won't be solid triple. The middle layer will be a series of cutouts. Well, let's weigh it. 2,940 grams, 2.94 kilograms. It's roughly 6.5 pounds. So if we were to just do 3 equal 3mm layers, we would be nearly 20 pounds. We can definitely do better. Using a flap disc, this works great to complete the final shaping details, smooth the curves, and match our template line exactly. It requires a light touch because it can easily eat out a chunky bite. This also deburrs everything, important to help the layers sit flat and make great surface area contact for the epoxy to bond well. It's Friday. I gotta show you guys this. I'm gonna give you a little update on the bunny cam. You're like, what do you mean? Well, this is what I'm talking about. We got a batch of fresh buns out of the oven. Two layers done, one to go. The middle layer will be mostly comprised of the lightweight stuff. So obviously I'm going to some trouble with this sandwich layer. Now I know what some of y'all are thinking. Just cut this out of a single layer of thicker stuff, it's so much easier. I understand, but also understand that I've gone to tremendous trouble for weight reduction on this car. From the fiberglass hood to the fiberglass trunk lid, the sparkle seats and mounts weigh only 13 pounds each, carbon fiber T-tops, aluminum alternator bracket, removable stereo system, lightweight battery, aluminum exhaust, all custom aluminum tubing, on and on. It's psychologically difficult to add weight back, so we're going to make every pound we add earn its weight in function. Okay, so time to tackle probably the most interesting part. I made a couple of templates. And this is what I have in mind as far as the sandwich layer. So these sections will get cut out. That'll leave 3 inches all the way around, 3 inches in between, and that should shave several pounds off. This sandwich layer is one trick. There are more tricks up my sleeve, which I'll reveal soon. Where this weight is located is good because it is extremely low, but since it is at the nose, it will increase understeer at lower speeds. The real advantages begin at higher speed. Oh, my spidey sense is tingling. These pieces that are cut out here, I just had an idea for some future projects. They'll be perfect. Sorry, I lost the eternal fight with my camera battery power. It was exciting. I held my breath, but I got it done. Certainly the most delicate part right at the end because it's at its most vulnerable, but all's well that ends well. It is significantly lighter. I'll get it on the scale. We'll check it out. 1,505 grams. Okay, I'll take it. So for this middle layer, that essentially cuts the weight in half. I think I'll spare you guys the fast mo filing sounds. Okay, I know what you guys are thinking. You're like, a hand file, shoot me in the head. Well, it's not that bad. That only took me about 25 minutes, maybe tops. And it was accurate. It does a perfect job really easily and no mistakes. Whereas with the flap disc, and I love the flap disc, thank you Mr. Flapper, this actually just saves time and no mistakes. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. He just built a new shop and he's out here in this dust bowl. Well, I don't like to do all this cutting and sanding and making a massive mess inside my garage. That's not what it's for. It's for clean stuff. I'm also building a cut shop, which is going to be for all of this mess, and it's going to be a separate shop down the way so that cars can stay clean. This 3mm foam signboard cuts really easily with an X-Acto knife. It's awesome. You may have noticed I label everything. It does help to save time when reassembling, especially when things can be flipped left to right or upside down. It helps out. Last one, then I can go get the middle layer and start inserting these. Something about these inserts and these layers, and it's reminding me of licorice all sorts. I'm like hungry right now. All I can think about is licorice all sorts. Well, another half hour of my life I'll never get back, but we're ready to get gluing. So, we are getting to the exciting stuff. I just peeled off my protective little plastic layer, and it's a good idea to wipe everything as clean as possible with microfiber cloth. Works really well. Stolen from the house, just don't get caught. I've made holes in the bottom of this bottom layer so that I can screw the whole thing into the bottom of the air dam just to temporarily hold it until I can secure the rest of the mounts. And now it's time for epoxy. I'm not exactly sure how much I should pour out, but there's probably a good hour of working time, and this is a bit of a cool environment, so it will not set for several hours. That gives you an opportunity to move it around a bit. I find that this epoxy also, once you put the two layers together, they suck together. So there's really no need to put a bunch of weight down on top. I probably will a little bit, but it sucks together so well. Once the air is out of there, it does not release back out. And these layers are very flat, so I'm going to use a tuna can for my mixing station. I'm guessing it might be about the right amount. We'll see how far I get. Well, I think I guessed pretty well on that amount. You know what they say, you gotta be good to be lucky, right? Or is it lucky to be good? Both. So I'm pushing on a lot of areas, and I'm wiggling it back and forth just a little bit, and that creates the suction. Because it's so much surface area, it's hard to move, but it does move, thankfully. Okay, I think we're pretty good. Slip my filler pieces in. As tempting as it might be to peel off my protective layer, I'm going to leave it in place just because there's dust on it, and I wouldn't want that falling on my adhesive sections. So, all these are in, and I'm going to peel my... I didn't finish my sentence, did I? Peeling my protective layer. Last layer. Okay, I've lost a foam roller. Now that could be a problem because it has absorbed a fair bit of the epoxy, so I'm not sure how much we're going to lose. We might lose too much. Looks like I've lost another foam roller. So close. Wow, I think I managed to make it. You can tell you're okay for enough epoxy or adhesion when roller is still sticking like crazy to everything. Make sure I didn't miss any spots. Okay. Now, because I'm adding the top layer, which I want to keep clean as possible, new gloves. You know you're getting good coverage and adhesion when you can barely move the layers to line them up. But it's still possible. Just making sure that my layers have sucked together nicely, and they have. It's out of my hands now. We'll let that dry, and then we'll check on it tomorrow. Okay, back at it. So, something that I didn't talk about yet is we've got these directional arrows on this panel. Now, earlier on, I looked at the Illuminate website. It didn't tell me what those directional arrows actually mean. I called the outlet. They didn't know they were going to call their supplier and get back to me. So my guess is that with a 4x8 sheet, 8 feet in that direction, the arrows are going to point in a direction which there is going to be the most flex and or the least permanent distortion. In other words, it's going to flex without permanently distorting. That's my guess. But in the case of this one that I'm making here, where we've got 3 layers of it, it is not going to matter. It's going to be so strong. Now, just to be kind of on the safe side, I've got one layer going arrows this way, another layer arrows going that way. I don't really remember which way the center sandwich layer was pointing, but we are not worried about this flexing from left to right. What we want is to minimize flex of that lip up or down. So the rigidity, we actually want things to be rigid, you know, in this direction. So I think we're going to be just fine. But like I said, the triple layer, it's not gonna care. That being said, let's just kind of see what kind of weight this will support by itself without any attachment points. Basically bridging it. Is this exciting? I'm sold! I've just made a snowboard. Actually, it's not a snowboard for going downhill, it's a snowboard for hopping uphill like a seal. That's 300 pounds of solid seal muscle. And muscle is heavier than fat, don't forget that. I'm pretty sure I'm not fooling you guys. I've been 175 pounds since grade 3. Everything just grew up around me. Anyways, that's good. Awesome. Now to sort of the reality as far as the weight. I weighed it and it came in, believe it or not, exactly at 7,700 grams. That's 16.97 pounds. It's not the end of the world because I still have a few tricks up my sleeve. This ends up being 9 mils. If you compare this to 6 mil, there is much greater tensile strength for the thickness in the 3 mil panel compared to the 6 mil panel, simply because there's a greater aluminum to composite material ratio. When you triple that 3 mil layer, this 9 mil layer is the tensile strength about 5 to 6 times as strong as 1 6mm layer. That's why I'm going with a triple layer. I'm not resigned to this weight at all. There's going to be some more tricks coming down the pipe. So anyway, I've got my holes drilled where my original cardboard template attachment points were under there. We're going to get that on here and mark out where we want to build our attachment points. Okay, this could get a little awkward. So important for a splitter not to get scratched. So right away I can see that T-section that's jutting out at the back, that's making contact already with our center where it drops down underneath the front. Okay, so we're looking up at the front of the car from underneath. You can see where our T-section here is meeting up with the lowest point of the frunk. There's this drain plug right here. The other two are right there. So we want to cut this away so that the splitter can sit up much tighter and higher at the back here. This is going to be our most important attachment point. And then I'm thinking another one right here to the outside of the subassembly, and the same thing here to the outside of the subassembly right here. I'm not sure if we'll need anything out wider. We'll deal with that when we get to it, but get these three in position. And there are also other multiple points towards the front that I can also address. Where the radiator used to mount and sit on is another possibility. Tackling the rear center mount. All the mounts will be out of aluminum for lightness, but braced well to be super strong and no bending. Starting with some L angle, clean it up with a flap disc, then cut the third side to brace it. That will do. Time to weld these up. I'm still using my Everlast 250EX machine, which I purchased a decade ago. It has been flawless, aside from replacing the main breaker switch once. Okay, so our bracket fits. The fan shroud sit at an angle about like that, and about 1/2 inch clearance. So now we cut the splitter where we marked it and see where it ends up sitting. That way we know how high or how low to put our mounting bracket. The unnecessary section of the rear center T-shaped part of the splitter that was left long on purpose has been cut to fit the bottom of the frunk. After a test fit, I added a 1/4 inch aluminum spacer at the top of the mount to change the angle and reach down a bit further. Drilling the hole in the mount, that 1/4 inch thick section will make a really strong mounting point. Good. Now, to get the rear center mount in position and to drill the mounting hole in the front of the frunk. Work our way up in size a little bit. One more to go. We're going to seal this up really well with either sealant or paint or both. For those that keep hearing me say the word frunk and are confused, it is MR2 speak for front trunk or bonnet, since our cars have 2 trunks. Now let's just have a look and see if that is sitting flush with our splitter underneath. We can decide what to do later about this closing off this area behind the rad after, and we can do it with super lightweight stuff. Because there's not a ton of like downforce or pressure or anything like that happening there. So it can be some 16th inch ABS, similar stuff that I've used up here to block off between the heat exchanger and the rad. That is nice. It's going nowhere. Now, to make the left and right rear mounts that will bolt to the subassemblies. I'm starting with this L-shaped piece, but then it's going to require a 90-degree bend. The further you bend aluminum, the weaker it gets. So it is much stronger to make two 45-degree bends rather than one 90-degree. I also plan to add another bridge piece or brace to create a strong final triangle shape. It's also a good idea to try and bend aluminum only once in one direction so that it doesn't get metal fatigue or create some stress fractures. And there is our 90. The back of the bracket will sit flush against the subassembly. The splitter will mount to the bottom of the bottom piece, and we're going to do a brace in between. After our first test fit, I also welded on an extra ear, which would allow for a third mounting bolt. Okay, so here are my two left and right mounts. They're being held in by 3 stainless bolts that go into the subassembly. And right now the bracket is just an L bracket, but I'm going to brace it to this long edge here to the top corner to create a triangle. Same thing goes for this side here. And I'll get a triangle shape going from this corner up to the top corner. So I was happy with the angles of the right and left rear mounts. So I put the braces in. That'll make them super strong and still very lightweight. Gonna throw them back in. Now for the front mounts. These will attach to the OEM radiator mounting bracket where the rad used to be.
Blade's getting dull.
Unlike the rear mounts, which have easy access to hold a lock nut in place to bolt up the splitter, these front mounts will be thick enough material to tap into directly, so access won't be an issue since no nut required. However, attaching these front mounts to the rad bracket still poses a challenge. See? Nice and chunky. We're going to use some M8 bolts to hold these in place. Okay, I'm going to introduce you guys to my greatest source of stainless rod. Recognize it? So just make sure you grab the rack that you've never used and no one is ever going to use, because otherwise you might regret it on crispy pizza night. God, I got hungry just saying that. Anyways, so it comes with all kinds of bends and curves ready to go. My plan is this. That little hole, the drain hole in the radiator support bracket, I'm going to weld this nut onto the end like this, and then I can stick it through the hole and into position. Then we can have a nice big strong bolt. This is an M8 that can hold that mounting bracket in place. That is certainly not the size of pizza I make anyway. So if you're ever welding onto a nut, keep the bolt in it. It'll wick some of the heat away from the threads and keep them from distorting. So as I explained, the rad mount isn't thick enough to tap into, so we need to use nuts to bolt into. I'm going to make some custom wing nuts with only one wing. Nuts that can be inserted into the rad bracket through the 2 holes in the bottom of the rad mount. The holes will also serve to hold the one wing of these nuts in place as they jut down through the holes. These wings are essentially some small handles so that I can hold them to get the bolt started. So I've got my hole drilled in the bottom of the rad support, drilled my hole into my mount, and then this is the surface to mount the splitter onto. I'm going to drill and tap that. So you can see I'm hanging on to my one wing handle there. The moment that bolt has grabbed the threads of that nut, we can let it go and it'll trap in the hole. Okay. Gotcha. Just grab my level, line it up with the other mount, the back. Well, it looks pretty good to me. So the rear mounts, it was pretty easy to drill out the splitter for that. But the front ones here, we're kind of going blind once we get the splitter in place. So we need to kind of make a marker to measure exactly where we want to drill for this guy. So I just use a piece of metal, put a bolt through it,
stick that bolt through the rear hole, and then line it up with this front mount, and then I make a mark right in the dead center. And I do the same thing from the center mount to the left mount. Again, make a mark where it would be right through the center. I'm going to drill a hole in those places. That way I can put a pen right through it and then mark right on the splitter. Then drill that hole in a splitter where these two lines will cross. Then bring the splitter, install it on the back, and then drill through the hole in the splitter and tap right into here. And then do the same for the other side, and then we can move on to the front support rods. Okay, so putting my marker to use. This is my left side here. It's going to go in the left mount, like that. So I don't know exactly where the front mount is, but I stick my pen through there and make my line. Do the same thing from the center mount. X marks the spot. Right side. Helps that I'm not drilling a towel. Good job, Marty. Perfect. Sorry guys, we gotta take just a minute here and get into some true blue nerd stuff. It's gotta be done. Gray's Engineering has done some great modeling, different types of modeling as well. I'll put up the link for you guys. As the air approaches the front of the car, there's sort of a big cushion here of air trying to go up, around the side, through, and under. And this cushion being pushed forward creates a point of stagnation, which is just at the bottom of the bumper. That's where the air basically decides whether to go up or whether to go down. The splitter doesn't change that at all. So this is the main point of stagnation. It may, in effect, have a slight effect on it if you were to, really introduce a large lip and bring it out farther or angle it in different ways. But for the most part, the stagnation point is going to be right here. So the air that is deciding to go through, it's heading downwards already. It's already decided. It's going down. That's what's going to push down and create that downforce on the splitter. The angle of the splitter is not going to have a heck of a lot of effect. On top of that, that modeling shows that underneath the splitter here, there is turbulence. There is actually significant vortices happening right here. So that means that we can improve the smoothness of the airflow under the splitter by actually angling it up somewhat. If we can get that air to be smoother going underneath and fewer vortices here, then we end up with more laminar flow, faster flow. Again, that means you're going to be slipping through the air better, and you're actually going to be creating more downforce overall on the car. So we'll see what the splitter ends up at. I'm going to guess, I still have to bolt all this in, that it's going to be very close, maybe 1 degree pointing upwards, maximum 2 degrees pointing upwards, and that's still going to give us excellent downforce and pass underneath the car a little bit better. Let's talk through that a little bit. The actual shape that would give us the most downforce under a car is slightly high in the front, the lowest under the center of gravity, and then going slightly up the other side, like a banana. That's a reverse aerofoil. That is what gives us more downforce. The other thing is that if you were to keep going and you were to lower your splitter all the way so that it's almost touching the ground in the front, you're not allowing air to go under the car, that actually hurts. And I know this is going to drive some of you nuts. You're going to go ballistic. You'd actually start to destabilize parts of your handling by having it down so low in the front and disrupting. What we're trying to go for is not just downforce, but we're going for drag coefficient. We're trying to be as fast as possible, smooth as possible, less drag. We want to win all the way around. This is cake and eat it too stuff. Chances are, if you are raked down and forwards like this, you may start to see the biggest differences at high speed. You might be topping out 5 or 6 miles per hour less on your back straightaways and wondering why. You've got increased downforce, but your drag coefficient is negatively affected. Probably the image that scares the living daylights out of most of us is that image of a high-speed boat with its tunnels and everything else suddenly catching major air, and the whole thing does this. Now, we've seen Indy cars do the same thing, and or Formula One cars do the same thing. They catch some air and, oh man, they do all kinds of crazy stuff, right? And that's sort of, I think, the driving fear behind some of what we apply to a front splitter. Well, there's a big difference between allowing smooth airflow under a car that is generally staying on the road. You know, when we've got a power boat and it's doing this on the water and it's skipping and bumping and all kinds of things, yeah, there is a chance that if it tips up enough and keeps going, the bottom part becomes an area of stagnation. Basically, when that happens, the whole thing just, you know, we're changing everything. So, but for a car that's with its weight is generally going to be staying fairly planted on the ground. In this case, in our cars, we're worried about a lighter nose. And yes, that is a factor. But if we've got smooth airflow going under the car and we've got increased downforce, and believe you me, we are going to have increased downforce at the front of the car with this splitter, even although it is going to be angled slightly upwards, it'll never happen. It won't be a problem. So get that speedboat out of your mind. That's my take, but I'm not going to just finish it and call it good. We're going to try and measure. We're going to try in a few different ways, and we'll get to that, measure the differences in pressure zones in the front of the car, before and after splitter. I can already see a major problem. This white is way too clean. It does not match the other 13 whites that are on this car. Some good info regarding aero and splitters in particular. Kyle.drives or Kyle.engineers on YouTube does a pretty fine job of covering some of this stuff. Check it out. Guess I could always move that stuff behind the car. Yeah.